Hello, everybody. Hello. Good day to all of you. I hope you have been enjoying these sessions brought to you by TESOL in Italy, which are conducted virtually for this coming season. It's a pleasure for me also to be here as well. And please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Christopher Vassiliou, representing Publications, as you can see from the banner in the background here. And because I know that we don't have that much time, let's get immediately into the process. First of all, just to say that I'm an English teacher also. I've been teaching English as a foreign language in Greece, where I'm based at, for the past almost 20 years, actually. It's been. I've also done my master's degree in developmental and learning disabilities. And over the last couple of years, I've been collaborating with Publications, which is also sponsoring my session as well here in this occasion. So thank you very much for attending this session. And what it is that okay, we're gonna be on air. Okay, yeah, I just got a message that we're gonna be on air, and we are on air. Okay, all right. So go. So without further ado, let's start off with what it is that we're going to be focusing on in the course of this session. As you have probably already seen from the presentation, we're going to be focusing on enhancing higher order thinking skills in a classroom setting and how we can find the opportunity to actually make them fit into our classroom setting as well. So higher order thinking skills, what is it that we talk about when we're focusing on higher order thinking skills? It's actually this equation, more or less, is what let's say more or less sums up what higher order thinking skills comprise of. The two basic ingredients, let's say, that contribute to reaching a higher order way of thinking and cultivating those higher order thinking skills requires critical thinking and problem solving. So let's see how we can, first of all, blend these by having a look at, first of all, what critical thinking is. These are just two definitions. There's a plethora of definitions that you can find that more or less can sum up what critical thinking is all about. I've selected two that more or less are concise and define how they are an important element of achieving higher order thinking. A process that challenges an individual to use reflective, reasonable, rational thinking in order to gather, interpret, and evaluate information in order to derive a judgment. So these are keyword concept words that we see here that comprise what critical thinking is all about, making use of these features in order to have critical thinking activities into the class, and a process that involves acquiring information, but not only sticking to that info, but evaluating it as to be able to reach a well-justified conclusion or answer. So this evaluation makes it higher order in the sense that we don't stick only to that reading comprehension part that usually asks us to for some info that we can derive from a text, let's say. So we'll get into that a bit more as we move along. The truth is that on many occasions, what happens that, it's part of a developmental perspective. It's part of developmentally. I mean, like, we are conditioned by birth to follow authority figures. Developmentally, it's part of how we grow up. So this is a reality which is challenged, and it's supposed to be challenged when, as human beings, we start to interact with more environments. We leave from the home environment, and the first big environment that welcomes children, students from different home backgrounds is the school setting. So this means that in that setting, the first challenge is to be able to mingle with all these different environments the school is a hub for, provides a safe hub for, and it is supposed to provide a safe hub for different environments, home environments that blend in a school setting. So the result is that such conditioning is the antithesis of critical thinking, because when you are supposed to go and follow the rules that your parents are guiding you, that are suggesting, and you have to go with what it is that they are recommending or demanding from you, this does not leave that much room for critical thinking. And yes, up to a certain age, this is just fine. But as we grow older and we have and we have more and more influences from the different people that we meet, from the knowledge that we acquire, this requires the cultivation of critical thinking. So the result is that the conditioning here is the antithesis of critical thinking. And in order to transfer this gradually to the classroom setting, as it is being depicted from this image here, let's see how critical thinking might relate to education. This is a question now, but I want you to focus, if you can make the writing out on the script, the extract from this comic strip. The teacher addressing to the class goes like, I expect you all to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers who will do exactly as I say. Of course, this is supposed to be a humorous input, in the sense that there's so much contradiction in this sentence, right? You cannot be independent and innovative, critical thinking, when you are following the figure of authority, and this occasion as it is being projected by the teacher himself, right? So this is sometimes what we need to wonder. Is it that we allow room for critical thinking to take place in our classroom setting? Truth is also that students' heads are not empty vessels that are to be filled with knowledge. It would have been wonderful. Where do I have it? Yeah, it would have been wonderful to be able to input all the info that we want by importing a USB stick somehow to the brain that is connected with the brain of the student. But this, again, apart from the fact that it would be totally in contrast with critical thinking, it's also something that cannot be done. So students' heads are not empty vessels to be filled with knowledge. They've got the background knowledge, and we need to excavate on that and take advantage of the knowledge that they have in order to be able to flourish it, improve it, and give them more and more ideas, and let them find their space and make connections with what they are already familiar with. So it's a matter of teaching students how to think instead of what to think. It's all about the process and less about the strict detailed guidance. There is guidance also in critical thinking, but there is guidance on paving the way for how to think, not dictating, but more like monitoring and suggesting. So you might be familiar with Bloom's revised taxonomy here. Benjamin Bloom, who headed a group of educational psychologists back in the 50s or 60s or something, developed a classification of levels as it is being projected here through this pyramid. Now, as you can see, the base is pretty wide and pretty spacious, contains much more space, because there we need a strong base in order to be able to get this pyramid become bigger and bigger and reach a specific level. But of course, apart from that, these are also a provide like the steps, the levels of classification of intellectual behavior. So the higher we go, the more demanding it is for us to see and be able to answer more why questions and how something is done, rather than just sticking to the manual and just obeying and following the directions. So higher order thinking takes place as we move on up the pyramid and start to think more about how something can be evaluated and what is it that can stem from what it is that we are presented to create something new as we reach on the summit of this pyramid. So this means also that higher cognitive work is required as we move on up, while the lower cognitive work is required when we are at the lower levels of this pyramid. So in order to be able to understand each level's contribution, more or less, what I have done here in order to see how we can implement what is being taught to us, presented to us in theory, and put it into practice as to fit every one of our lessons, is by answering these questions. I have prepared some questions here that if we are able to answer them, then we are able to see how we can implement Bloom in the classroom, in a reading text, in one of those typical reading comprehension texts that we usually have in course books that we are making use of as teaching material, or even in stories, in readers that we might be making use of. So we go through the lower levels first, remembering and understanding. So remembering and understanding is all about having read the text and being able to recall the information. It's what it reminds me to a great extent is especially those lower level reading comprehension activities where we ask from students to read the text and be able to answer the questions as they extract the information which is required from the text in order to respond to that answer. Understanding means that can the students, after having read a text, let's say, for example, can they explain the ideas and the concepts from that? Moving on a bit more up the level, it's all about, can students make use of the information that they have extracted from the text in another familiar situation? So this moves a bit up the level in the sense that we are not only asking from students to remember, let's say, some details from the text, or when something occurred, when did this happen, or what was the main character wearing in that specific text, but also try to make a connection with another familiar situation. Let's say, for example, that you've got a text that is dealing with environmental problems, right? Any type of environmental problems. And in the current affairs right now, there is something going on in the news that there is sort of a connection with an environmental problem. Like, let's say there were some floods, or there was an avalanche, depending on which part of the country you are at, right? Or whatever. So this means that making use of this information that we obtain from the text can be connected with something that is happening right now in the news. So this requires an application. So we can see that there is a bit more of moving up the level. Analyzing, can students break the information into parts in order to explore relationships? So here we have moved towards the upper part of the pyramid, where students are now not only asked to make use of that information, but it goes deeper into putting through a lens some of the details which are being supplied. Evaluating. Now, can students make or justify a decision? Let's say we're having a text where in this environmental problem, the government had to take some measures. Now, the questions that can sprout from this are connected also with, let's see, we've got the info about this text, but how are we going to rate the government's intervention in how they dealt with this this problem that occurred, the environmental problem? So this requires the students to make use of the information and be able to have an opinion on what is it that they probably would have done in this issue. And of course, reaching the summit of the pyramid, can students create new ideas, producing products by using what has been previously learned, like making a new connection with all that? As I said, this is a way of implementing by asking the right questions. I would say, for example, post-reading questions, if it is a reading comprehension text, that gives you the opportunity to implement what we talk about in theory and how we can implement Bloom's taxonomy in class. Let me give you another example in a story that it's probably well known to a lot of you. Applying Bloom's taxonomy to the story Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Now, I'm pretty sure you're all more or less familiar with this story. Now, over to you. I want you to pick one of these levels, level 1, remembering, level 2, understanding, and submit in the chat box a question that could more or less show a level, that could be depicting the level of this specific story. Through the chat box, I'm going to be looking if you have any ideas on what would be suitable questions for remembering, understanding, or applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating when it comes to Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It is a story which is, if you are familiar with Goldilocks, trespasses, enters illegally the Three Bears' house, has their porridge, lies on their beds, creates a mess of the house, and then when she is being discovered sleeping there, she just evacuates the building, right? She gets out of the house. She gets out of the house. So in this occasion, we see that she got away with it, more or less. She created a mess. There is a lot of there's a lot of exploitation that can take place from this specific story, and a lot of these questions, especially as we move on higher up the level, can actually intrigue students to try to make connections with something that is happening right now in order to get the students a bit more like that. No, the chat is not disabled, Laura, because I can see your answer. I can see that you have submitted here your question. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to respond to see it. Or let me just check if let me see. If it is, how about now? Okay, Miriam. Yes, yeah. It's in the question and answer box. Sorry. So typing here, easy remembering question. How many bears are in the story? For example, if we are using the Q&A. Yeah. Okay, that's one way of responding through here also again. So how many bears are in the story is, let's say, like an intro question in order to check out if the students remember some important details about this specific story. And as we move on up the level, we can see that we're going to be having more and more questions that ask students to not only respond to easily detected questions, but draw some examples or make some applications. Like remembering a question is, what did Goldilocks eat in the bear's house? A simple question. Or understanding, why did Goldilocks like the little bears share best? These are in pieces of information that can be easily extracted from the text and require the students just to have read the text. But when we move on up, for example, here applying is an activity like this could reflect on an activity like this. Paint your favorite scene from the story. Paint your favorite scene. So this is also in accordance with a lot of other things that we talk about and have taken over, found their space in education, like the multiple intelligence theory, right? Where here, for example, students can demonstrate what it is that they have obtained from the story and can exhibit it through something that they are very good at, through art, let's say, by painting their favorite scene, and of course, describing their painting, which is like it reinforces them to participate in an activity like this. Analyzing, comparing one story, the story that we've got right now, with another story, and breaking down the story into smaller scenes as to get those extracts and compare scenes, what happened before and how did this develop, how did this evolve, or comparing one story with the other, the main characters, what was the difference with Little Red Riding Hood? In both stories, what they've got in common, for example, is that we've got two young ladies there who had a sort of way of connecting, or actually some difficult encounters with wild animals, right? Evaluating, judge whether or not Goldilocks should be arrested for breaking into the house. Now, this is something which is very connected, because you can extract a value from this story. What is the moral of this story? If we are to transfer it to what is the case and what we are familiar with right now. Exactly, Maria. Is there a moral to the story? Is the evaluation. Creating, what would you do in a similar situation? Or a stranger entering your house or in your country, what would be the case? As we see here, suppose the story was called Goldilocks and the Three Fish. Retell the story is another way of creating something new from the given context. So all these are different ways of actually implementing what we talk about in theory, Bloom's taxonomy, in the classroom. And this is what I always like to feel that can be done. It can also be done in something which is less time demanding, especially if you want to have a warm-up activity. If you want to introduce a specific new lesson to your students. So it can be something like this. What are they thinking? Select an image, get them attracted to the image, find an image that is very funny for them, for example, that can bring a laughter, that can change, let's say, break the monotony of the class. What are they thinking? And ask them to respond in a social media term, like, for example, caption this. Instead of saying, what are they thinking? You can say, how would you caption this image, for example? Now, these are different ways of making connection with a lot of this Daniela. Yes. Thank you, Daniela. Tom, for example, if you were to caption this image right now, what would you say that they are thinking about? We see some ladies there, old ladies, right? And they seem to be quite amused by what they are watching. Obviously, they are delighted to be in contact with a new means of technology, for example, something that they had not been really much accustomed to. So something that they are thinking is probably that, look, our good old friend who left the country and has been living has gone to the States, and we hadn't seen her for 35 years or so. We are able to have a chat with her, or just looking at some of the images they have uploaded on their social media, right? And all these things. Or an image like this one, what is she thinking? Probably, especially if we are to take into account what is gradually, I mean, like what is happening with some of the protesters in the museums, is like, okay, I've got nothing to do with the environmental problems that exist right now. So please don't harm me. Don't pour any wet paint on me. No wet paint for me. So I always like to think that the course books that we are making use of, whatever course books it is that you are making use of, are our basic tool. But the most important thing is to see how we can take advantage of that tool that we have in order to exploit it in such a way as to bring our own personal touch to what it is that we're doing. So how we can promote higher order thinking in the language classroom. These are some points here. I'm going to show you some examples taken from one of our series, Pioneer, and see how we can exploit the content from each course book. Now, relating new information to prior knowledge. This is something which is very important and we want to have, because it is also a way of connecting students' background knowledge to what it is that we're going to be introducing in the text. Prediction, allowing room for prediction, especially if you are making use of interactive whiteboards. You know that sometimes we do not have the text revealed, because in this way we want to intrigue students, to get them curious, to describe the situation, what is going on here. So this gives them the opportunity to start to think, not in words, but because the images always come along with the words, we want to make the connection. So they have to fill in the words that they can think of in order to be able to describe these images, since images and word go hand in hand. Engaging students in problem-solving activities like this one, tasks, which ask them to find a reason to communicate. It's not a typical speaking activity. The info that one student has is the info that the other student really needs to have access to in order to have this activity go on. So it is much more of a realistic way of communicating, and we are providing this using the inductive approach, especially when it comes to grammar, instead of the more deductive approach, using it in order to be able to demonstrate those newly presented grammar through examples that are being presented. And of course, with the vocabulary. I'm rushing a bit because time is limited, so I want to make sure that I'm going to be able to finish it as much as possible as I can. Asking open-ended questions, as we saw, this is a key feature of what we talked about in Bloom's taxonomy. So incorporating, it's also there in those post-reading, post-speaking questions, activities that ask students to discuss what is it that they have what is it that they have gained from this specific lesson and how it can be applied to learning. Promoting autonomous learning through the self-assessment and asking students to work on themselves through various activities. Bringing social, analyzing the material in the language. So it's not only about doing these specific fill-in-the-blank activities, it's also about breaking it down and seeing how we can make use of these new word concepts that we are learning. Bringing social issues into the classroom, like we mentioned before, making connections with what we are familiar with right now in all this. I'm asked to conclude this session, so I want to thank you all for, I mean, there's a plethora of ways that we can incorporate Bloom's taxonomy. The main idea is to have those questions to think about that can be the ones that answer which level that it is that you want your students to reach having read a specific text. Thank you very much for joining this session. It was a pleasure. And hopefully next time we're gonna be able to conduct a session like this from up close. Thank you very much, Daniela. It was interesting for me also to have the opportunity to do this session with you. So yes, you can contact our partners in Italy for the material, and they are gonna be more than they're gonna be very pleased to supply you with anything that you require. Thank you very much, Irina. Thank you, Maria. Thank you all for your responses and your participation in this rather brief session. Take care. Bye-bye, and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Bye-bye.
You said that the road to happiness was long and winding. You said that the forest would get dark, and that the ground could shift here upon this hill we're climbing. No matter how close we get, we're still so far. But I trust we'll find the clearing. I'm trusting the trail. No matter what we're feeling, there's one way we can't fail. Let's just keep hiking. Let's plant our feet. Let's just keep hiking. Keep hiking with me. Hold my hand, baby. Keep hiking with me. You said the road up to success was an impossible test unless we had some sort of map. And I could feel it in my chest just as our feet begged us to rest. I think this just might be the end of that. But I said I trust we'll find the clearing. I'm trusting the trail. No matter what we're feeling, there's one way we can't fail. Let's just keep hiking. Let's plant our feet. Let's just keep hiking. Keep hiking with me. Hold my hand.